Welcome to Quiz Time. My name is Simon, and I'll be your host for the next 100 following questions. This challenge will be the baby boomer trivia questions. So sit back, get ready, and join me for the next 100 questions. And let's see how many you can get. Which 1950s TV western featured the Cartwright family on their Ronda Rosa ranch? Was it Gunsmoke, Bonanza, or The Rawhide? Bonanza. What nickname was given to the U.S. interstate highway system when construction began in 1956? The Freedom Roads, the National Highway, or the Eisenhower Interstate System? The Eisenhower Interstate System. Which 1950s hairstyle for men featured short sides with hair on the top shaped into a flat horizontal surface? Was the ducktail, the flat top, or the pompadour? The flat top. What was the first widely successful artificial sweetener that was introduced in 1957? Was it Equal, Sweet and Low, or Saccharin? The correct answer is Saccharin. Which 1968 theatrical production shocked audiences by featuring full nudity on stage? Was it Jesus Christ Superstar, Hair, or Oh Calcutta? It's Hair. What type of pants, characterized by the extremely wide legs, became popular in the late 1960s? Was it pedal pushers, bell bottoms, or capris? The correct answer is bell bottoms. Which toy, introduced in 1958, became the best-selling toy of the 1960s? Was it Silly Putty, Lincoln Logs, or the hula hoop? Of course, the answer is hula hoop. What 1964 investigation led by U.S. Surgeon General linked smoking to health hazards? The Framingham Heart Study, the Surgeon General's Report on Smoking and Health, or the National Cancer Institute report? The Surgeon General's Report on Smoking and Health. Which 1950s actress was known as the blonde bombshell and starred in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? Was it Jane Russell, Elizabeth Taylor, or Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe is the correct answer. What 1960s dance, named after a cartoon character, involved moving the arms and legs in a jerky, mechanical motion? The monkey, the swim, or the robot? The robot. Which 1969 festival featured Santana's breakthrough performance but was not Woodstock? Isle of Wight Festival, Altamont Free Concert, or the Newport Jazz Festival? Altamont Free Concert. What 1968 animated Beatles film featured a yellow submarine and the Blue Meanies? Was it Help? Was it Magical Mystery Tour? Or Yellow Submarine? You guessed it. We are all living on a yellow submarine. Which household cleaning product, introduced in 1958, featured Rosie the Riveter in its advertisements? Was it Ajax, Mr. Clean, or Comet? Mr. Clean is the correct answer. What pivotal event in 1957 involved 9 black students and Central High School? Was it March on Washington, Little Rock 9 integration, or Montgomery bus boycott? This event was the Little Rock 9 integration. Which handheld calculator, introduced in 1972, revolutionized mathematics education? Was it the IBM Executory, the Texas Instruments SR10, or the Casio Mini? This calculator was called the Texas Instruments SR10. Which experimental electronic music style that emerged in the late 1960s using Moog synthesizers? Was it disco, new wave, or psychedelic rock? Psychedelic rock is the answer. What 1960s TV show featured a talking Palomino horse named Mr. Ed? Was it Mr. Ed, My Friend Felicia, or National Velvet? You could have guessed it. The answer is Mr. Ed. What iconic children's character was created by Jim Henson in 1955 and later appeared on Sesame Street? Was it Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, or Kermit the Frog? The answer is Kermit the Frog. The answer. Which landmark in 1969 book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the 5 stages of grief? On Death and Dying, The Denial of Death, or The Interpretation of Dreams? The correct answer is On Death and Dying. What groundbreaking 1950s invention by Earl Tupper featured a burping seal? Was it the Reynolds Wrap, the Ziploc bags, or Tupperware? The correct answer is Tupperware. Which 1950s actor became known as the King of Cool and starred in The Great Escape? Was it Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, or James Dean? Steve McQueen is the King of Cool. What 1960s protest tactic involved occupying university administrative buildings? Was it teach-ins, sit-ins, or love-ins? This tactic was known as sit-ins. Which 1968 horror film, directed by George A. Romero, established the modern zombie genre? Was it Night of the Living Dead, The Exorcist, or The Birds? The Night of the Living Dead. Which social program, launched in 1965 as part of Johnson's Great Society, provided health insurance to the elderly Americans? Medicare, Social Security, or Medicaid? The correct answer is Medicare. Which 1950s TV personality hosted Person to Person and challenged Senator Joseph McCarthy? Was it Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, or David Brinkley? Edward R. Murrow. Edward R. What popular confection, introduced in 1954, featured a plastic stick that could be dipped into flavored powder? Was it Lick-Maid, Fun Dip, or Pixie Sticks, or Pop Rocks? The correct answer is Lick-Maid or Fun Dip. Which artist's 1962 exhibition of Campbell's soup cans helped define pop art? Was it Roy Lichtenstein, Robert Rauschenberg, or Andy Warhol? Andy Warhol is the correct answer. What 1969 police raid on a gay bar sparked the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement? Was it the White Knight riots? Was it the Stonewall riots? Or the Campton Cafeteria riot? The right answer is the Stonewall riots. Which 1960s TV show featured Agents Napoleon Solo and Ulia Kuryakin fighting against the organization Thrush? Was it The Man of Uncle, I Spy, or Mission Impossible? This TV show was known as The Man from Uncle. What 1957 musical by Leonard Bernstein was inspired by Romeo and Juliet? Was it Guys and Dolls, West Side Story, or The Music Man? West Side Story is the correct answer. Which common kitchen item introduced in 1956 revolutionized how Americans viewed TV dinners? Aluminium TV dinner tray, the convection oven, or the electric can opener? This item was the aluminium TV dinner tray. What 1960s fad involved college students cramming into phone booths? Was it streaking, pantry raids, or phone booth stuffing? Phone booth stuffing is the correct answer. Which controversial 1971 report documented US military decision-making in Vietnam? Was it the Pentagon Papers, Warren Commission report, or finally, the Kerner Commission report? The Pentagon Papers. What 1968 film featured a sentient computer named Hal that refused to open the pod bay doors? Was it Forbidden Planet, Blade Runner, or 2001: A Space Odyssey? A Space Odyssey is the correct answer. What cultural phenomenon of the 1950s sparked moral panic about juvenile delinquency? Was it jazz music, comic books, or television? What culture? Comic books. Comic books. What groundbreaking 1953 research by James Watson and Francis Crick revealed the structure of DNA? Was it the double helix, the human genome, or the cell theory? The double helix. Which 1960s counterculture author coined the term gonzo journalism? Tom Wolfe, Hunter S. Thompson, or Norman Mailer? Hunter S. Thompson coined the term gonzo journalism. What 1969 album by Miles Davis is considered a pioneering work in jazz fusion? Bitches Brew, Kind of Blue, In a Silent Way. Bitches Brew. Which futuristic cartoon show created by Hanna-Barbera in 1962 was set in the year 2062? The Jetsons, The Flintstones, Scooby-Doo? The Jetsons. What 1965 blackout affected 30 million people across the northeastern United States? The Great Northeast Blackout, the New York City Brownout, or the 3 Mile Island Incident? The Great Northeast Blackout. Which 1950s TV show pioneered the modern late-night talk show format? Was it The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, or What's My Line? The Tonight Show. The Tonight Show. What type of men's facial hair became popular during the counterculture movement of the late 1960s? Was it the soul patch, the mutton chops, or pencil mustache? Mutton chops is the correct answer. Which experimental film technique became popular in the 1960s using rapid cuts between scenes? Montage, split screen, or a jump cut? The correct answer is montage. The correct answer. What cultural event in 1969 featured a performance by Jimi Hendrix playing the Star-Spangled Banner? Was it the Isle of Wight Festival, Monterey Pop Festival, or Woodstock? Woodstock. Woodstock. Which household product introduced in 1958 revolutionized non-stick cooking? Was it Pyrex, Teflon, or aluminium foil? Teflon. Teflon. What automotive innovation introduced by Volvo in 1959 significantly improved vehicle safety? Airbags, 3-point seatbelt, or anti-lock brakes? The 3-point seatbelt. Which 1960s science fiction show featured the catchphrase, "Danger, Will Robinson"? Was it Lost in Space, Star Trek, or The Outer Limits? Which 1960s? This catchphrase comes from Lost in Space. What popular toy introduced in 1952 allowed children to create drawings with aluminium powder on a plastic screen? Was it Magnadoodle, Spirograph, or Etch-a-Sketch? Magnadoodle. Magnadoodle. Which 1974 disaster film starring Steve McQueen featured a skyscraper fire? Airport, The Towering Inferno, or Earthquake? The Towering Inferno. What 1963 event led to the first nationwide broadcast of a presidential funeral? Was it Franklin D. Roosevelt's death? Was it John F. Kennedy's assassination? Or was it Martin Luther King's assassination? John F. Kennedy's assassination was the first nationwide broadcast. Which electronic game invented in 1972 featured a moving light dot with 2 paddles? Was it Space Invaders, Pong, or Breakout? Which electronic game invented Pong is the correct answer. Pong. What groundbreaking 1967 film starring Sidney Poitier addressed interracial marriage? Was it In the Heat of the Night? Was it To Stir with Love, or Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? The correct answer is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Which early computer introduced in 1951 was the first commercial computer to use magnetic tape storage? Was it the IBM 701, or the ENIAC, or the UNIVAC 1? The UNIVAC 1 was the first computer to use magnetic tape storage. What 1960s medical advancement revolutionized birth control for women? Was it the diaphragm, the IUD, or the pill? The pill is the correct answer. Which popular 1960s musical group consisted of John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, Denny Doherty, and Cass Elliot? Was it The Byrids, Jefferson Airplane, or the Mamas and Papas? This musical group was called the Mamas and Papas. What 1957 novel by Jack Kerouac became a defining literary work for the Beat generation? On the Road, Howl, or Naked Lunch? On the Road. On the Road. Which 1950s TV show featured Ralph Cramden and his catchphrase, "To the moon, Alice"? Was it I Love You, Lucy? Was it The Honeymooners? Or Father Knows Best? The Honeymooners. The Honeymooners. What popular hair treatment of the 1960s involved wrapping sections of hair in aluminium foil? Was it Beehive, Page Boy, or Frosting? What? Frosting. Frosting. Which 1950s musical innovation by Les Paul pioneered multi-track recording? Electric guitar, reverb, sound on sound. Reverb is the correct answer. What 1967 film directed by Mike Nichols featured the song Mrs. Robinson? Was it Midnight Cowboy, The Graduate, or Bonnie and Clyde? The Graduate. The Graduate. Which actor starred as a private detective, Peter Gunn, in the eponymous TV series that premiered in 1958? Was it Craig Stevens, James Garner, or Robert Stack? Craig Stevens. Craig Stevens. What 1950s youth subculture was characterized by black leather jackets and greased black hair? Was it greasers, beatniks, or teddy boys? The greasers is the correct answer. Which 1960s musical group featured Peter Tork, Davy Jones, Mikey Dolenz, and Michael Nesmith? Was it the Monkees, the Dave Clark Five, or the Animals? The Monkees is the correct answer. What pioneering 1968 computer demonstration by Douglas Engelbart introduced the mouse and hypertext? Was it the ARPANET demonstration, the Xerox PARC presentation, or the mother of all demos? The mother of all demos. Which toy first sold in 1959 featured a pull string that activated a voice recording? Chatty Cathy, Mr. Potato Head, C&C. Which? Chatty Cathy. Chatty Cathy. What 1971 coffee shop chain founded in Seattle would later become a global phenomenon? Is this Starbucks, Pete's Coffee, or Dunkin' Donuts? Starbucks. Starbucks. Which 1950s TV game show hosted by Groucho Marx featured the secret word duck? Was it You Bet Your Life, What's My Line, or I've Got a Secret? You Bet Your Life, that's the right answer. What 1974 investigative journalism led to President Nixon's registration? Was this the Watergate investigation, the Pentagon Papers, or the Iran-Contra affair? The Watergate investigation. Which children's educational show premiered in 1969 with the song Can You Tell Me How to Get to Sesame Street? Was it Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Captain Kangaroo, or Sesame Street? Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. What 1950s automobile feature became a status symbol, featuring large tail fins and a chrome detailing? White wall tires, Continental kit, or tail fins? Tail fins. Tail fins. Which iconic magazine launched in 1953 featuring Marilyn Monroe in its first issue? Life, Playboy, or Esquire? Which iconic magazine? Playboy. Playboy. What 1956 science fiction film featured the warning, "Watch the skies"? The Day the Earth Stood Still, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or Forbidden Planet? Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Which fast food restaurant, founded in 1954, featured a mascot named Speedy before introducing Ronald McDonald? Was it McDonald's? Was it Burger King or Wendy's? McDonald's. McDonald's. What 1970s fashion trend featured women wearing extremely short shorts? Was it hot pants, pedal pushers, or culottes? What 19... Hot pants. Hot pants. Which 1960s TV show featured a family living at 1313 Mockingbird Lane? Was it The Addams Family, The Munsters, or Dark Shadows? The Munsters. The Munsters. What popular kitchen appliance introduced in 1967 allowed for quick meal preparation? Was it the slow cooker? Was it the microwave oven? Or the food processor? The microwave oven. The microwave. Which 1969 film starring Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman won the Academy Awards for Best Picture? Was it Midnight Cowboy, or Easy Rider, or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? The Midnight Boy. The Midnight Boy. What 1953 scientific discovery by James Watson and Francis Crick changed our understanding of genetics? Was it the genetic engineering, the human genome, or DNA double helix? DNA double helix. Which 1950s actor starred in A Rebel Without a Cause and became a cultural icon after his tragic death? Was it James Dean, Marlon Brando, or Montgomery Clift? James Dean. James Dean. What popular board game, introduced in 1949, featured plastic pigs and a colored spinning wheel? Was it Candyland, The Game of Life, Scrabble? The Game of Life. The Game. Which musician's 1956 appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show featured camera angles only showing him from the waist up? Was it Elvis Presley, Little Richard, or Chuck Berry? Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley. What revolutionary 1960s advertising campaign for Volkswagen featured the tagline, "Think Small"? Was it the Marlboro Man, the Volkswagen Beetle campaign, or the Pepsi generation? The Pepsi generation. The Pepsi Which influential 1969 book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the 5 stages of grief? Was it When Bad Things Happen to Good People, On Death and Dying, or The Denial of Death? On Death and Dying. On Death. What 1950s television show starred Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz as Lucy and Ricky Ricardo? Was it Here's Lucy, The Lucy Show, or I Love Lucy? I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy. Which electromagnetic toy introduced in 1960 allowed children to draw with a magnetic pen? Was it Light Bright, Magnadoodle, or Etch-a-Sketch? Etch-a-Sketch. Etch-a-Sketch. What 1974 architectural innovation in Chicago became the world's tallest building at the time? Was it the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center, or Sears Tower? The Sears Tower. The Sears Tower. Which 1958 novel by Truman Capote was later adapted into a film starring Audrey Hepburn? Was it Breakfast at Tiffany's, In Cold Blood, or The Grasshopper? Breakfast at Tiffany's. Breakfast at... What popular 1950s children TV show featured Buffalo Bob Smith and a marionette? Was it Howdy Doody, Kukla, Fran and Ollie, or Captain Kangaroo? Howdy Doody. Howdy Doody. Which musical style originating in Jamaica gained international popularity in the late 1960s? Was it Calypso, Reggae, or Ska? The answer is Reggae. The answer? What groundbreaking 1963 book by Betty Friedan highlighted the problem that has no name? Is it The Second Sex, The Feminine Mystique, or Sexual Politics? The Feminine Mystique. The Feminine. Which 1965 TV show created by Gene Roddenberry featured the Starship Enterprise? Was it Star Trek, Lost in Space, or The Outer Limits? Star Trek. Star Trek. What 1950s hairstyle for women was characterized by hair piled high on the head? Was it a beehive, a page boy, or a bouffant? What 1950s hairstyle? Beehive. Beehive. Which 1960s animated TV show featured a flying squirrel and his moose friend? Was it Huckleberry Hound, Rocky and Bullwinkle, or Yogi Bear? Rocky and Bullwinkle. Rocky and... What 1955 film starring James Dean and Natalie Wood explored teenage rebellion? Was it Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, or Giant? Rebel Without a Cause. Which household cleaning product introduced in 1958 featured the slogan "Stronger than Dirt"? Ajax, Comet, or Mr. Clean? Ajax. What popular dance from the early 1960s involved putting the right hand in and shaking it all about? Was it the hokey pokey, the twist, or the mashed potato? What popular... The hokey pokey. The Hokey Pokey. Which Broadway musical that opened in 1957 was based on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
Was it My Fair Lady, West Side Story,
West Side Story,
or
The Music Man?
which Broadway music?
West Side Story. West Side. What 1950s automobile feature became synonymous with 1950s car culture and drive-in restaurants?
Was it the white wall tires,
tail fins,
or the chrome
or
bumpers?
chrome bumpers? Tail fins. Which electronic musical instrument invented in 1960s was featured prominently in Good Vibrations? Was it theremin, Moog synthesizer, or the mellotron? Theremin. What 1969 science fiction film directed by Stanley Kubrick featured the computer HAL 9000? Planet of the Apes, 2001, A Space Odyssey, or Solaris? What 1969? 2001, A Space Odyssey. 2000. Congratulations and well done on finishing completing this quiz. Please comment your score below so we can see to let us know. And also please remember to like and subscribe so we can stay notified on our future as to our quizzes. Once again, thank you so much for joining us again, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye. Congratulations and well